the idea really is that the more you do it, the more the interval shrinks down. And we can define our population to be so small that statistics become irrelevant and everything is parametric. But in general, the kind of statistics we're learning in here, we don't want that to happen. Or we can't. I shouldn't say we always want it to happen. We can't have it happen. You're interested in blood circulation in men from age 30 to 40 that have a second stroke. Well, there's no possible way you'll ever be able to measure all those people. So you draw the sample, you get a margin of error, and you say it's somewhere between these values. I mean, some of the examples I use in here are pretty inane, but the inanity hopefully is overshadowed by the fact that the tools you're getting with the inane little examples are applicable to a much wider range. Good points, though. Good points, yeah. Good points. I got one more little one to look at down here. I couldn't get any more current than February 2012 for this. So this is a quote. Sales of homes in the foreclosure process rose 4.28% to 4,600. Assuming, and this was overall, I believe, in the entire state. This was not Bend. This was the entire state of Oregon. Assuming about 50,000 sales in the last 12 months, which is a bunch of websites were basically agreeing on that number. So of 50,000 sales in the last 12 months, 4,600 of them were in the foreclosure process. With me so far? What I want to look at is how does that rate compare to Bend's? Now I know I'm kind of going apples pears here, because up here the two intervals that we were looking at were foreclosures that are in the for sale process, and this is foreclosures that are actually selling. So it's a little bit apples pears. What I really want to just do is compare the ratios. Compare the ratio. So the for sale foreclosures in Oregon versus the for sale not sold foreclosures in Bend. So let's run it again.
9.2.
9.2 again. But check the margin of error.
0.27.
But check the margin. Exactly. The margin of error here was about 2.15%. The margin of error here appears to be somewhere around the neighborhood of
1.4.
Exactly about 1.4, so half of 2.8. Very nice. So it shrinks down. Now we're going to run it again. We're going to run it again on 46, and these are approximate values. I was able to get these only via secondary sources for 4,600, and then the 50,000 is basically a rough average of all the sources I was able to find, some of which I have sourced down there at the bottom. Out of 50,000, confidence level 95%, 9.2% in the center, but look how tight the interval is. Look how tight the interval is. Basically 9% to 9.5%. So your margin of error, once again, goes even further down because you've cast the net even wider. We'll go right here with it. So you got 8.9% there. This is Oregon in 2012. They all have the same center. Every single one of those data sets has the same center. But because of the change in sample size, that's what gets us our varying widths of the intervals. And that's the beauty. Now you're starting to see, hopefully, why when we ran the penny experiment, when the class was larger and I had more penny trials, the margin of error around my estimate of the percentage of heads was shrinking. And that's why when you look at the overall results of the penny experiment, the 4.3 or the 43% head rate had almost no margin of error whatsoever because I had thousands and thousands and thousands of trials versus tens and tens and hundreds of trials. Ashley, go.
When I read those statistics that you gave us, how come none of them ever have a margin of error? It always says 3 or 4%.
Because you guys are becoming that tiny percentage of Americans that understand why you have to have one. Americans don't understand why a margin of error is important because they don't understand what a sample is. They assume that if they read it in media, it's right. You understand that if you read it in media, the sample statistic needs to be edited with a margin of error to be 95% right, which is wordy. Americans like Twitter. We like 140 characters or less. We don't want to say things like 95% confidence because that takes up like 25% of the words we're allowed to write in Twitter. But that doesn't mean that it's right to ignore them. So this is where we're teaching. If you forget all the formula stuff from 243, and if you forget how to check assumptions of a t-test, I don't care. As long as from now on, when you read media sources, you read it with that kind of critical eye.
You would be so happy. I'm taking human nutrition.
Of course I'm happy.
And she's telling us about research papers, and she totally goes into the stuff we're talking about here. It's like, I know this. Julie
Hood would obey. Totally. She understands. She taught me that I was pissed off when Tang went to fruitrition. Tang stopped using sugar in their in Tang, and they started using high fructose corn syrup instead of sugar, I believe. I think so. No, excuse me. They stopped using high fructose corn syrup and went to Splenda, sucralose. And I got pissed. I'm like, this is ridiculous. They're taking a natural product and making it a chemical process. He's like, dude, relax, first of all. Secondly, the reason is because of the lower caloric content of sucralose versus high fructose corn syrup. Because so many kids are becoming more and more sedentary and therefore more and more heavy. If we can cut some of those dead calories out, it's going to help, hopefully, ostensibly, with the obesity problem. Like, Julie, you're big. Then she taught me caffeine's not a diuretic. I'm like, that's crap. Caffeine's got to be a diuretic. And she sat down with the papers with me and showed me why caffeine. And she understands it. But you see, there are not many Julie Hoods in the world. There are not many Ashley Parkhursts in the world. People just say, oh, 4,600, that's a lot. Define a lot. It might be a lot. If you come up to me and go, give me $4,600, I'm going to punch you in the face, that's a lot of money. But when I look at 4,600 or 50,000 and I compare it to 65 over 702, I realize it's the same percentage. But most Americans don't do this. It takes too much time. We have Facebook. Yeah? It's not a very good answer, but it's the answer I think that's out there. All right, you got that glazed look. Let's take 5, yes? Yes, let's take 5. Shut the camera down, let it cool down a little.